How does a fishmonger who lost $300,000 in bad domain name purchases at the beginning of his career end up becoming a successful domain name broker? Stay tuned to find out. I have 3 short sponsor messages before we get into today's show. First, if you have a great domain name and nothing to show when people visit, you're missing out on potential advertising revenue, leads, and partnership opportunities. Nichewebsites.com can build you a site quickly with a price option to suit any need. But as their tagline says, they don't just build websites, they build businesses. Second, if you're buying or selling a domain name or a portfolio and you want an estimate of its value, Estabot.com is the place to go. Just like you'd visit Zillow.com to get an estimate of a house value, Estabot.com provides key information about the most important statistics so you can make an informed decision based on data. Finally, DNX.com is a domain name exchange that uses a reverse auction platform to provide fair market prices for quality domain names that are manually filtered by an experienced broker. At DNX.com, domain prices drop until someone decides the price is right. But don't wait too long or the domain you love might be purchased by someone else. All 3 sponsors have a clickable banner in the upper right-hand corner of DomainSherpa.com. Here's your program. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Seiger and I'm the publisher of DomainSherpa.com, the website where you come to learn how to become a successful domain name investor and entrepreneur directly from the experts. We all lose money at the beginning of our domain name careers. Investing in domain names stays a hobby for those of us who continue to lose money, break even, or turn a small profit. But for some of us, we learn, adapt our strategies, and begin making good money. Professionals, in my opinion, are those individuals who buy and sell domain names full time and make it their primary income. On today's show, we have one of these people. Today, we're going to learn how a fishmonger who lost $300,000 in domain names ended up turning around his strategies and tactics to become one of the most successful domain name brokers in the industry. Andrew Rosener is a professional domain name investor and broker who runs media options. He worked with top-level executives at companies including Coca-Cola, Dow Jones, Google, Tesla, Retail Me Not, Restoration Hardware, the Boston Celtics, and many more. I invited him here to talk about the beginning of his career as a domain name investor. Drew, welcome.
Thanks, Michael. Glad to be back.
All right, so let's turn back the clock, and I know how difficult it is after a number of years being in a certain industry, how difficult it is to do that. What year was it approximately when you were, and what were you doing when you discovered that there was money to be made buying and selling domain names?
So, at your request, I did go back and I did some digging and I really tried to figure out, the answer to some of those questions. And so it looks like I think my first domain registration was around about 1997. And it was something to the degree of clickprovidence.com, I believe. And but then, I had a few domain names, which I don't even recall what they were. But, I didn't know there was an industry. I didn't know that there was resale or anything. These were things I thought, I've had some degree of IT background. I was in college.
And your dog wants in on the interview too.
He wants to be a part.
Nice.
So, it was in 2005, actually, that I realized there was an industry, that, there was this aftermarket, that there was a robust industry, that there was people actively buying and selling every day.
How did you find out about it? Like, how did you even hear about it?
So that's a whole other story. But basically, Tess Diaz from GoDaddy, she was who now works for me. Tess Diaz was my account rep at GoDaddy. And one day she called me out of the blue. We were on our way to our friend's farm in upstate New York. And I was driving, and it was a long drive. And I got a phone call from GoDaddy, and I was like, yeah, whatever, what do you want? And
what are you going to sell me? Yeah.
You've got all these domain names, and what are you doing with them? And I was like, I don't know. I thought they were cool. And she told me, well, you should be learning more and buying better domains. And, here's some blogs you should check out. Here's some websites. Here's this forum. And, by the way, there's this whole aftermarket of people buying and selling these things. And I was like, oh, interesting. And I think we spent like maybe an hour on the phone discussing this.
Huh.
And then, probably there, or not probably, the reason I hired Tess now and that she works for me now, and I couldn't be happier, is that, she's just amazing at follow-up. So she followed up with me and was like, sent me links and really kind of brought me to the next level to sort of, help me understand that there was this industry and pointed me in the right direction, basically told me to sign up to get the DN Journal newsletter so I'd start seeing about all these sales that were taking place. And
so basically you owe Tess. I hope you're paying her really well, Drew.
I do owe Tess.
All right, Tess, that was for you. So what were you doing for a living when Tess called you up and told you about the domain name industry and that there was an aftermarket? And
I was in the global seafood commodity business. I sold dead frozen fish, and I specialized in scallops.
so all these boats go out. Where do scallops come from? Alaska? No, they're not.
Oh, man.
Where do they come from?
You're opening up a can of worms by asking that question.
So they go out everywhere.
They come from all over the planet.
Yeah.
Traditionally, New Bedford, Massachusetts is the scallop capital of the world. However, due to aquaculture, China, the Philippines, Vietnam, are primarily China, major producers of scallops, primarily the bay scallops, the small ones. And then you also have Latin America. You have Chile and Peru are major producers of scallops, both wild caught and aquaculture. And New Bedford is still a very robust hub. I think it's still the largest grossing port in terms of dollars. Or I don't remember. I don't remember if it's in terms of pounds traded or dollars value, but the largest grossing port in the United States still.
So is that what a fishmonger does? You buy seafood in bulk at a fixed rate and then sell it to stores?
There's many different levels of the industry. I mean, what I did is I sat in a little office in Newport, Rhode Island, and I bought and sold frozen scallops primarily. We dealt with some lobster. We dealt with these small Canadian shrimp, Pandalis borealis. But primarily we dealt with scallops. And I was buying, so basically you've got packers. Okay, so you've got the fishermen, right? And the fishermen come into port, and they basically the boats are either owned by the packers or they're selling at a dock price to the packers. And then the packers are basically shucking it, cleaning it, doing whatever it is so that it's ready to be marketed. And then either, it's difficult to say because some of these things are totally vertically integrated, right? Some of these companies, and then, but let's pretend that each segment is a different company. And then, so we would buy from packers, and those packers might have been in New Bedford. They might have been in Chile. We were probably the biggest buyer from Peru for a long time. We were probably the biggest buyer out of Japan for a long time. And so we were buying from packers in all of these different places. Tons from China. We were selling about 30 million pounds of scallops, or let's say of seafood. Most of that was scallops. But,
30 million pounds a year?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so was that
maybe 20 million.
20 million, 30 million, somewhere on that order of magnitude.
A lot of millions, a lot of pounds of scallops, a lot of dead fish.
And were you successful being this fishmonger that buys scallops and then sells them to?
I was very successful. My nickname, probably shouldn't even say this. My nickname was Crystal Meth because people thought I must be on drugs. Like I hustled. I mean, it's the same in the domain business. I just hustled. I wasn't afraid to pick up the phone and make cold calls. And so we were buying from those people and then selling to very large retailers, consolidators, food companies that were going to take that and then make value-added products. Anybody that could buy in bulk. I mean, the majority of our sales were, 5,000 pounds basically as a minimum, and then, up to multiple container loads. And, I was just hustling. We had we had an industry book of companies, and I just went one by one every day, tried to make at least 100 phone calls every single day and build a client list, and then, stay on top of it and keep serving them.
And how much sales volume did that company, was that your company, or you ran the company for a different owner?
No, it was not my company. Out of college, so I had a software company in college, real quick. And we built custom databases for small, medium businesses. Didn't like that at all. Basically, got out of that immediately. Although we had a couple successful pieces that we built, but nonetheless, I didn't know what I was going to do. And this guy called me and he said, "Look, I want to retire in the next 3 years. And I'm looking for a mini-me, and I want somebody that has no idea about this industry, but has, entrepreneurial experience and entrepreneurial drive that I can basically mold into a mini-me."
Yeah.
And I said, basically, I kind of told him to go pound sand. I had no interest in going to sell seafood. So he paid me $1,000 to come to Newport and see what they do, see what they're all about, and, see that they're not actually, getting their hands dirty in raw seafood. And I did that, and I immediately hit it off with the owner. And, basically I was his mini-me, and I grew in the company, and I basically ultimately took over the company, took over all the sales and marketing and operations of the company. And
is it fair to say that you were successful in this company because you were running it? You're doing 20 to 30 million pounds of seafood a year. It's got to be like a $20 million, $30 million company?
Yeah, we were like a, I don't know, $6 or $8 million company when I started, and when I left, we were doing about 30 million,
wow.
$36 million in sales. And
so if it's doing 30 million plus in sales, you're probably making over six figures a year. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I mean, I was, look, for my age, I was balling. I was like a single guy living in Newport, Rhode Island. I had a brand new BMW M3. I was like 23 years old. I was rocking out.
So if you're living, high on the hog.
I just finished my taxes, and I was looking at some of my old tax returns, and I was making a lot of money. I was making like, I don't know, about 300 grand.
Wow.
When I left.
So if you're making a good salary and you feel comfortable in that role, why would you even think twice about being called by your customer service representative from GoDaddy, which, back in those days, it's not like GoDaddy today with the weight that they have. Yeah, they were a big company, but like, why would you even spend an hour with Tess discussing buying and selling domain names?
Because I'm an anxious person, and I don't sit still, which is why sometimes I'm bouncing on the screen. It was an interesting thing for me. I liked the concept of domains, which is why I kind of bought a few very early on, and unfortunately, I bought crap. But I liked the concept. I liked the internet. I liked the web. I liked the interconnectivity and the globalization. So at the same time that I was doing this, I mean, I had my girlfriend, who's now my wife. She was living in Germany. I was in Newport, Rhode Island. We had this crazy, international love affair for multiple years. Flying back and forth, and so we were using. I don't even know if, God, I don't even remember, but I don't even think we had Skype at that point, and. That was like 2002 to 2005 time. I don't know. And, we were able to email. We were able to communicate, and so it was intriguing to me. And so, anyways, when I saw that people were making money in this, and I had sort of dabbled in it, I thought, well, I should be making money in this. So, I didn't immediately quit my job and say, okay, I'm going to be a domain investor. I sort of built up to that. I realized that there was this aftermarket. I saw that I didn't know that domains expired and people were, you could buy them for, relatively cheap. But Tess introduced me to that. So I started following those auctions and buying a lot of crap.
So were your first domain name purchases hand registrations, drop catches, or buying domains in auction, premium domain or premium domain names from?
Let's say post Tess Diaz phone call.
Yeah.
Let's.
As you moved from, just buying a few into investing.
Yeah. Up to that point, I had only hand registered domains. And then at that point, when I realized about the aftermarkets and these drop auctions and all that in DN Forum, I started to. I bought some on auction. I still continued to hand reg some. I couldn't tell you exactly, a percentage or so, but,
yeah.
I still.
But mainly hand registering and buying stuff in auction.
Yeah. I still, I probably daily I came up with, this is going to be the next big thing, and I hand register some stupid domain.
All right, so give me some examples. What were your earliest domain name purchases? And I made you go back and try and find as many as you could, Drew, because, you and I chat every once in a while, and I know the kinds of domains that you're buying today, but those domains that you're buying today were not the ones you were buying back in 2005. So share a few of those with the audience.
Let's just say if I put my earliest list of domain names on the Domain Sherpa review, I'd get laughed off the show. So I mean, some of the early registrations that I had or purchases were things like actforenergy.com, amberdoll.com. Let's see. bambooplanet.org, crd1.com, no idea what that is, caughtlocal.com, sustainablescollops.com, canadianseafood.com, eatsustainable.com. Hope I still have that one. Let's see. Findskills.com, but with a Z instead of an S on the end.
Nice.
That's classic. Justscollops.com.
Love it. So it sounds like it's a lot of phrases, brandables, and maybe some generic keyword phrases like Canadian seafood that relate to what your expertise was at the time.
Yeah, it wasn't Canadian seafood. That would actually be a pretty good demand, but it was Quebec seafood.
Quebec seafood.
Which is still not terrible, but it's not Canadian.
So, all right. So we know the kinds of domain names that you bought when you first started. And those types of domain names, actforenergy.com, you're never going to get an inquiry on. It's not going to have anybody typing it in. You're looking for that one person. What's your opinion? What was wrong with these domain names, Drew?
I mean, the easier question would be what was right about them. Everything was wrong with them. They didn't represent any specific business for the most part, right? Like Quebec seafood is a niche. There may be a buyer out there that pure only sells Quebec seafood. The problem is that, in the seafood industry, it's more of a B2B industry, although that's just starting to change. But it's more of a B2B industry. And so, nobody cares about the domain names. It's a commodity. People are trading it. It's not an efficiently traded market, but it's still a commodity. It's traded on low margins, and it's a B2B business. So nobody really cares about your domain name. So
you bought domain names in industries that people didn't care about.
Yep. They weren't in consumer-facing industries or consumer-facing products. They weren't the name of a product, place, person, or thing. And when I say person, I mean like a job description. They didn't really represent anything. They were just these like clever little, or to be honest, not so clever. But at the time, I thought they were clever little, brandables. And unfortunately, this is a representative list of what most people send me on a regular basis, and and at the time, I mean, I can't remember now. I can't go back and say this is why I bought this domain for most of these. But when people email me a list today with something like I don't know, paytobegreen.com. They've got a great explanation of why they registered that domain, why they think that domain is worth what they think it's worth. But the fact of the matter is that, it was that one lucid thought that they thought they had that made them register that domain or buy that domain that gave it that value, and nobody else has that thought. Nobody else has that idea. The boardroom, when they're making a purchasing decision, didn't have that idea. And the domain only has value to the person with that idea. Now, you could get lucky and somebody else comes up with the same idea that you had and decide that that's going to be the name of their product, service, business, whatever. And, it's like winning your scratch lottery ticket, and you're going to sell it for $5,000, $10,000, $25,000. But it's not a way to build a business. You're playing the lottery. You're buying a bunch of scratch tickets, and you're probably better off buying the scratch tickets than buying the $9, domain name. So it's not a business. You're messing around, and that's what I was doing. I was messing around, and it took me 3 years and about $300,000. In education to learn what a good domain was.
3 years and $300,000. So let's say that, you bought domain names at $10 a piece. That's 30,000 crappy domain names that you purchased or renewed.
So I had about 1,800, but I think the number was about 1,800 domains. When I finally looked up and said, "Oh my God, I've got a list of crap."
Yeah.
I think I had 1,800 domains. And I was buying them, I wasn't just hand registering them. I was buying them in auctions. I was paying a few $100s for them. I think there was only a handful that I might have paid $1,000 or more for. I remember I bought one 3letter.com on a GoDaddy auction, and I was sweating. But I saw these things trading. I saw these things showing up on DN Journal. I thought, I need to have one of those. And I bought CFJ.com. It was either CFJ or CJF, and I sold it to a law firm. But it was stupid. I sold it for like $7,000. I think I paid $4,000 and I sold it for $7,000. And I thought, wow, I thought I won the lottery. I should have sold it for $50 or $100, but.
So of those 1,800 domain names that you registered over 3 years and paid about $300,000 for, what happened to them? Do you consider it just an educational lesson? And
pretty much, the way that I've digested it is as a college education. It was like, and I joke with my parents. I say, look, you guys totally wasted your money on my college education. I mean, that was worthless. This was good education. It was a very, very expensive. I think you can go to Harvard for less, but it was a very good education, and it's paid off. It's paid off. I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
But it has worked out.
So you said to me, I worked my bloody butt off for years and lost $300,000 before I made my first dollar. Most people, I think, when they start off in the industry, they'll register a bunch of names. That's the easiest part of the whole process, is registering crappy names. But you said you worked your butt off, which is what you did in the seafood industry. You're not afraid to call people up. You're not afraid to work hard, to put in long hours. You've exhibited that as a fishmonger. Usually, if you can work your butt off and you put in a lot of hours, you come up to speed a lot quicker. What happened? Why did it take 3 years to figure out how to buy good domain names?
Well, look, I mean, if you're a dog shit salesman, you can hustle from 5 a.m. till 10 p.m.
Yeah.
And you're not going to sell a lot of dog shit. And ultimately, or pigeon shit, as Rick says. And ultimately, I was sitting on a list of pigeon shit. And so it didn't matter how hard I worked. There was no buyers. There was nobody wanted these things.
And you didn't just get so frustrated that you're like, forget it. I'm not doing anything. Tess, I'll get you.
Well, look, I was making a boatload of money at the time, right? So I didn't actually quit the seafood business and go into domains full time until 2008.
Okay.
So, I could cash flow this because I was making a boatload of money in the seafood business, and this was just a hobby for me. It was something I saw people making money, and I knew that I could make money. I just had to figure out how, and so I was just trying over and over and over again. Unfortunately, I was repeating the same mistakes over and over again, but.
So what did you start doing differently, Drew? How did you make that transition from buying crappy domain names and hustling to buying domain names that people wanted and hustling?
So, I think I've even said it on your show, and I've said it in a few other places about, sort of what I called my start into the domain business. And it was ultimately, I had these names that related to the Spanish ham. And I finally, I won't tell the whole story again, but I ultimately sold them. I sold them to, this ham was illegal to bring into the U.S. There was this, I was obsessed with it. I thought this stuff was the best thing I'd ever had, which probably is. It's the most expensive meat on earth. I wanted to import it. I was in the seafood business. I know about importing food into the United States and selling it. So I thought, I want to do that. I want to import this stuff. You can't get it in the U.S. Then I found out it was illegal, but I bought these domains anyways in the hopes that someday I could do that. And, ultimately, I found it. One day I'm listening to NPR, and I heard that George Bush was about to get one of these hams to the White House, and so I immediately got to my office. I started researching, who was the importer that finally got it legalized, and I found him, and I called him, and I said, "Hey, I want a ham," and whatever. So without going into all the details, we struck a deal. I sold him a group of these 4 names for $5,000 plus. I got this whole ham, and it was a 15-pound ham. It was a 15-pound ham. I think it was selling that stuff at the time. I believe it was $700 a pound. I could be crazy, but it was at least $500. It was $500 to $700. Today it trades at like $250 to $300 a pound. But it was like $500 to $700. He had a monopoly.
Yeah.
And he told me, "Look, kid, it's totally sold out." But anyway, so then I told him I had these domains. He was like, "Oh my God, that's awesome. I want them." And suddenly I was getting one of his first hams and $5,000. And I thought, geez.
And what's the name of this ham, Drew?
It's called Jamón Ibérico.
Jamón Ibérico.
Jamón. There's different varieties, like in terms of quality.
Uh-huh.
But it's Jamón Ibérico. It's
JAMONIBERICO?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is just Ibérico ham.
Iberico ham. Yeah. And so did you hand register these domain names like ibericoham.com, or did you have to buy them off somebody?
After I tried this stuff for the first time with my wife in Spain, which I guess was probably, I don't know. I probably registered these 2003.
Yeah. So you tried it, you registered them, you heard that on NPR that this guy was importing them and giving one to then President George Bush. And you called up the supplier and you said, "I've got these domains," and he wanted to buy them off you. So you sold them for how much plus a ham?
$5,000 plus a ham.
$5,000. And so that was sort of the light that went on your head that, like, here's a product domain name in a niche with a high dollar value.
Yep.
And you realized that all the other the 1,800 domain names that you bought in the past, or majority of them, didn't fit that sort of model.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
And so then I started targeting, sort of services, products, stuff more in that direction.
So most people today, most people watching the show today can likely scrape together a few $100s or maybe a couple $1,000, but there's no way that they'd be able to scrape together $300,000. Is it necessary today to be able to buy domains that are person-related, product, service, place-oriented, that are decent without tacking on, a couple of words before or after the keyword?
Yeah, so, I mean, look, you guys, the viewers, can benefit from my $300,000 education and not spend that yourself But yes, I mean, you need to register good domains. Don't go out and register 1,800 crap domains and think, oh, well, I only paid $9. Well, it's $9 times, whatever, however many crap $9 domains you register. And, and then you got renewal fees. And so, you're better off, and I tell it to people all the time, don't go buy 20 crap names. Okay, let's say that you're going to buy 20 crap names for $10 each. Okay, it's $200. And you're going to hold on to them for 5 years before you realize that it's crap, and you're going to finally let it expire. So that's $1,000. Take that $1,000, go on DNForum, go on NameJet, go on SnapNames, and go on DNX.com and buy a good domain for $250 to $1,000. Something that is meaningful, a product, a service, a place, something that's up and coming.
Do you have any examples of stuff off the top of your head that you've recently purchased, Drew, that might be a good example of stuff you could buy for $200, $300 that is something that's worth?
Yeah, really these days, we're really focused on short domains and 2, 3 letters, 4 letters. So I don't buy that many names in that price category.
Okay.
But there are some. Let's see. Hold on. Let me pull up our recent purchases. Okay, yeah. These are brandables, but still, I think great values. Like I bought worldstudios.com and worldlogic.com for $100 each. And I would say that those names are, if I put those on DNForum right now, I'm sure I could get somebody to pay me $500 each, maybe even $1,000 each. Worldstudios.com is a great name. That can be, a global corporation. It's a good name. Worldlogic.com, a little less, but still good name. And I paid $100 each.
So it's not like Act for Energy or SearchForSun.com where there's likely only going to be one person around the world thinking about that same thought that you had. Whereas World Studios, there's a lot of studios around the world, and they, studios, whatever kind, development studios, production studios, movie studios, and they're all going to want some big type of, people to think that they're large and ubiquitous.
So, and then I bought on NameJet, I bought 9G.org, a 2-character.org. That domain, I don't know when it was registered, but I'm sure it's at least 15 years old. It's probably 17, 18 years old. 9G.org. I paid $800 on NameJet. And that's money well spent. $800 on a 2-character.org.
But wait, Drew, you're limiting your options by .org. You're saying like it's not a commercial enterprise. It's probably going to be some not-for-profit entity. And while 2 characters might be cool, what does 9G mean? Like, I don't get it.
I think that, I think that if you gave me 30 minutes, I could find you a handful of end users that I could sell that domain to for $5,000 without blinking an eye. Okay. However, a name like that, if I'm getting started, I'm going to buy that name for $810. Okay. And I'm going to, in a couple of months, I'm going to maybe put it on an auction on Cedo. Maybe I'm going to, run it in a Great Domains auction, or maybe a Domain Fest or Heritage auctions. And somebody's going to pay me. If I'm going to, look, I got lucky getting it for $810. And I guarantee you, if I put a $1,800 reserve, somebody's going to pay me $1,800 for it. And, and that's it. Then you double your money, and you just have to do that, slowly and gradually build yourself up.
Yeah. You and I had a conversation about what it means to be a professional. In real estate, you become a realtor, and you need to pass a test to do that. But there are no tests to require common sense or leadership or people skills or negotiation skills. In your opinion, what does it take to be a professional domain name broker?
So yeah, that's one of the questions I think a lot about. There's a lot of people coming into the industry that want to be domain brokers, and I think that's great. And I value a salesman very high. I think that a good salesman is probably one of the most undervalued skills out there. I think being a professional domain broker, you are representing, at least where we are, like we're trying to focus on really high value domains. You're representing a high value asset, and in many cases, you're representing potentially the most valuable asset that somebody might own. And and it could be worth 50 grand or 100 grand, or it could be multi millions. But aside maybe from their house, which may or may not be mortgaged, and so they don't really own it. This might be the most valuable thing that somebody owns. And I think that you need to have a high degree of tenacity, endurance, patience, and you need to be a natural salesperson. I mean, it is, domains are not liquid assets. You are going to be told no, 1,000 times before you're going to get your first yes. And it's true. And I think it stands true in many industries, but particularly in domains, because, we're still in the early stages of the internet. People are, they still don't understand the value of these domains. They're starting to. Businesses are starting to. Executives are starting to. It's becoming more common, but it's still a learning curve. It's still, every time I make a big sale, there's a degree of education that needs to be given to that person. So if you are not an expert, if you don't know, if you don't know the ins and the outs of domains, if you don't know how to justify the price of a domain, to the person on the other end of the phone, you're not going to close that deal. And if you can't close the deal, you probably shouldn't be picking up the phone in the first place.
So when you're representing, the large companies like Coca-Cola and Retail Me Not that you are either buying or selling for, most likely probably buying, I could understand that you're trying to close the deal. You need to be able to explain things in real people terms and explain why the domain is worth that much and close the deal. But when you're buying something like 9g.org, is being a professional domain name broker or domain name investor also, you just got to churn and burn? You got to buy stuff at a value and be able to flip it, because it requires a lot of those types of sales to all come together with big sales?
So I think there's a lot of questions in that one statement. I think that, so when you're dealing with those big companies, I mean, they want to be able to justify the price. They want numbers. Show me numbers, right? And so that was sort of how I came about with my sort of the Rosener equation of valuations. I thought, well, there's got to be a way to justify this. And so, analyzing thousands of sales and just through the experience and trying to find common denominators, we came up with some factors that go into the valuation and things that were justifiable to these guys to say, look, this is going to reduce your marketing budget because of this. This is going to drive more traffic because of this. So then to address the second part, which is like in terms of volume of sales to become successful, yes. And I did that through goals. So when I started out, I basically said, so when I started Media Options, not when I started out, when I started our brokerage business, I set out and I said, look, I need to make, and I mean, it's laughable today, but I said, I need to make $250 every single day. I don't care what I have to do. I need to make $250 every single day or I can't turn the lights out. And I did that. And of course there were some days where you miss, and there's some days where you make thousands. But I don't care if I made 5,000 yesterday, I still need to make 250 today. And
you're not looking at the averages, Drew. Like if I just make one $2,500 sale in 10 days, that'll average out. You don't look at averages. You need to execute every day, is what you're saying.
No, I'm looking at a micro level. I'm looking at literally, it's a goal every single day. I think it was Mick Jagger said, "Who cares about yesterday's news?" I don't care. Doesn't matter. I could have had a $1 million sale last week, and some people would rest on their laurels and say, "Look, we're going to Hawaii, and I'll take a month off." But I was building a business, and I wanted to build a business. I wanted to build a successful business, and I knew that if I made $250 every single day, that I could keep the lights on, I could continue the business, and I hope that it would grow, that I would eventually be making more than $250 every day. And so sometimes, that meant, cold calling and selling a domain for a lot cheaper than I thought it was worth, just because I needed to make that one sale today. I really hustled. I really got out there and I really hustled. And I think, when we were doing the domain name review the other day, I think it was Adam mentioned that, you need to build up your network. You need to make friends. And that's 100% true. There was a handful of guys, really 2 or 3 guys, that I sort of, came up through the business with. And, we were on Skype every day. We were emailing every day. And we were talking about what we bought, what we sold. And, these were guys that, look, we were all trying to buy similar type names. And, sometimes, we were competing. Sometimes we were colluding. But we were we were trying to make it, and, sometimes I'd get on the phone with my buddy Oliver and I'd say, look, I need to make my 250 today, man. I've got this name. I know it's worth more. It's worth more. Give me $500 for it. And, and he'd do it. Right. And then, a week later he needed a favor and I'd buy a name off him. And, and it works. And to this day, we still do tons of business together, at a higher level. But it goes both ways. He needs to raise money. Well, look, you got some liquid names. I'll buy them from you.
Yeah. Yeah. How many people do you have working at Media Options today?
3. Well, 4.
4. And how many outbound emails and telephone calls do you think originate from your business per day from those 4 people? If you had to just take a wild guess.
Not as many as in the seafood business. But I would guess if Neil's doing his job and I'm doing my job, probably, 100.
Per day?
I'd say 80. I say 80.
80 per day.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've got so many other issues to deal with in the business, in the day-to-day business these days, that I can't spend my whole day, selling and cold calling. Yeah. And to be honest, that's the part of the business that I enjoy the most. Well, I really like buying names too. I like tracking names through auctions, buying them, and tracking people that are hard to find. I like doing that stuff too. Yeah, can't lie. But sales is something I really enjoy, and so I really do. I like and probably it's like 2, ideally 3 days a week that I dedicate to. Those are my sales days, and that's I pick a couple names and I spend the day cold calling, sending emails, LinkedIn messages, whatever it takes. Researching who might be a good buyer, and then whatever it takes to get a hold of them.
All right. Hey, a recent commenter on Domain Sherpa wrote, quote, I used to have several hundred domains valued at $80 a piece and couldn't sell most of them, and I didn't develop them. I just held them. I now see how I could have done it better. Looks like investing in a small quantity of high demand domains was a better strategy. It sounds like you agree with that 100% based on 100%. Where you started.
Yep. It's about quality, not quantity. I mean, tried and true. Look, there was, we've bought a lot of 3letter.coms lately, and so I'm sort of like up to here. But, just on DN Forum this week alone, or maybe it was last week, you had like maybe 5 really good 3letter.coms that came on there at below market prices. And I'm talking about below wholesale market prices that anybody could have gone in there and bought them. And yeah, it's not a $300 domain. You're going to spend $5,000 up to $20,000. But you've immediately got value and profit when you buy that name. And I said it before. I said it in, I think, my last interview with you. You make money in the buy. And finding those deals, being able to get a liquid asset, okay, like mkm.com, I don't know if it's still for sale or not, but, it was on there. I think the high offer was like $10,000. I know that name can sell for $11,000. I know that it can sell for $12,000. I know that if you spend an afternoon and you actually cold call, 50 people that have MKM in their business, I know you can sell that for $25,000, and I'd be shocked if you can't get 50.
Yeah.
So, to think, I know it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money to go out and spend that kind of, spend $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. But, if you watch the market, if you do your research and you understand what the liquid values of these assets are, then you can be very confident in buying them.
So you're saying that it takes money to buy money. If somebody, I know you receive a lot of emails every single week with crappy domain names like the ones you just told me you registered at the beginning of your career. If you got an email from somebody, Drew, that said, hey, Drew, I'm not buying, 50 or 100 domain names at $10 a piece or $12 a piece. I'm going to spend $5,000 or $10,000 to buy this domain name off DN Forum. What do you think about that? Would you actually take the time to reply back to them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm more interested in the, I got to be honest. Okay. It's fine to start out with $300. Okay. But you are going to have a really difficult time. I'm going to, just flat out honest. If you've only got $300 to spend, the domain name business is probably not for you. I think you might get lucky, but you're going to have a very, very difficult time, or at least it's going to be a very slow progression for you to build up your equity, to build up your portfolio to a place where it's got, significant value that can be multiplied through sales or monetization. I'm much more interested in talking to the guy that's got $10,000, $20,000 to spend and says, look, I'm serious. This might be all my savings, but I like the domain industry. I see a future here. I want to get into it. I want to invest. I will spend time with that person and say, look, I mean, these are some opportunities I think are good. And there's a few people I've done this with. There's a few people that are now, they're making a good, I think they both still have full-time jobs, but they are making good money, flipping domains. They actually are competing with me now a lot on some, particularly on three-letter.coms. And so yes, I'm much more interested in helping that person because I think that there's a lot more room. That first off, they've got more money to work with. If you've got $300, there's not much I can do with that. I mean, but if you've got $10,000, I can point you in the right direction. I can kind of give you an idea of, look, this is the way that I would do it. I'd take $5-7 and buy one really good three-letter. Then I'd, take the rest and I'd go on to NameJet and I'd try and find a few great brandables that, for a couple $100 each, and then suddenly you've got 10, really good brandables and one, decent three-letter.com. And now you've got a nice little portfolio, and that portfolio, can be worked on. You can take, focus on one brandable, spend a couple days emailing end users, sell it, make 5x, 10x your money. If you bought it for $200, go sell it for $5,000, and if they offer you $2,500 and you think you've contacted enough people, then take it, $2,500. 10x your money and take that $2,500 and roll it into, into better names. But I think Paige always says, always elevate. Don't, always be working on increasing the quality of your portfolio. So I was really addicted to buying domain names for a very long. I'm still addicted. At least I've got some control over it. El Presidente holds the pocketbook. So. but when you are making a purchase decision, ask yourself, is this going to increase the value of my portfolio? Is this a better domain than something that I've already got in my portfolio? That's what you need to ask yourself. Especially if you're working with limited resources, you got to, if that domain does not better your portfolio, and by better, I mean it's of a higher value than something else in your portfolio of the same category, then don't buy it. If you've already got similar names, there's no reason, but move on to something else, or wait until you've got more money to buy a bigger name. But always be increasing the value of your
Great
portfolio.
advice. And if you have additional questions about how Drew started in the domain name industry and how he got out of that initial phase, please post them in the comment section below this video, and I'll ask Drew to come back and answer as many as he can. He will not do domain name appraisals. Do not post your entire portfolio. I think we've gone over enough about Drew's portfolio to begin with and where he is today and how you could take your funds and really focus them on assets that will improve. Drew, if someone wants to hire you and your team to buy or sell a domain name for themselves or their business, what's the best way they can reach you?
The best way is come to MediaOptions.com. We've got a live chat with somebody on it, basically during business hours. And we can point you in the right direction. You can email me at info@MediaOptions.com.
Great. And what's your general qualification for representing a domain name purchase or sale? What prices do you typically spend the time to focus on?
Well, so at this point, we've got a few different, dynamics of the business, right? So on the sort of lower end stuff, and by lower end, I mean, like, let's say less than $50,000. So it might be $1,000 name. It might be, we don't really want to deal with domains under $1,000.
So if I come to you with a $1,500 domain name that we both agree is worth $1,500, you would represent me?
Well, so this is what I was going to say. So in the category between $1,000 and $50,000, let's say, we will solicit that name through our newsletter, which goes out to thousands of qualified, 100% opt-in investors, marketers, lead gen. These are qualified buyers. In addition to that, we have DNX.com, which we can run your domains through our auction platform. At the higher end, so for our brokerage, for me to actually represent your domain name personally and, make cold calls and really hustle, me personally, I'm really only working on names that are over $100,000, unless it's what I call a slam dunk. If it's something that I think I can sell, quickly because I've got contacts in the right industry, then I might work on smaller names. But me personally, I'm really looking for names that I personally believe I can sell for $100,000 or more. But some of our other sales team, will work on names that are $50,000 plus.
Okay.
And in some cases, 25 plus.
Excellent. Andrew Rosener, domain name investor, entrepreneur, and broker. Thank you for coming on the show, talking about the early days of your domain name investing, and thanks for being a domain Sherpa.
It was painful, but I hope everybody learns from it.
We did. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.